What I thought I'd do is review the 5 dysfunctions of a team model by Lencioni very quickly, and then apply it. So we'll see where this goes. This model is familiar to a lot of people, certainly very popular, it's prevalent, it's been adopted by lots of folks. The idea of absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results makes some sense. Not only in a hierarchical model, it's descriptive. It's pretty easy to see some of those symptoms. And what are they? They're here in red, hopefully you can read them. Invulnerability, artificial harmony, ambiguity, low standards, and status and ego are behaviors that we tend to observe sometimes in a team. So knowing the popularity of this, of course this is the book I'm referring to, you might have seen some of these field guides that have been bestsellers and applied to all kinds of teams. You may know that Lencioni's done similar kinds of books, Silos, Politics, and Turf Wars, and Death by Meeting, which talks not only about the value of strategic offsites, but how they can be applied. So I guess I think the question is, so what? What's the real value, the practical value, the application of this model? So what I thought I'd do is provide 3 examples, sort of practical examples using different perspectives. So the first is what's called a functional perspective. And I often think about the steps in a function, the input, the process, the outcomes. Sometimes here I think about, well, what's required input and what's recommended input. And I'll give you examples in a second from the book. And then the process, I often think about things like the ground rules that Catherine stated on page 40 and then repeated, I think, on page 62. The whole idea, the 2 ground rules. You've got to be fully active, participate fully, and you've got to be present emotionally, energetically, intelligently. The second example of the process in that book, the need for offsites. They chose to have offsites every other month, 3 of them, I believe, and then a follow-up like 12 months later. The purpose of these was to disrupt things, to look at what is going on within the team and what needs to happen. And part of the process also was a high degree of restructuring. She opened the first one of these offsites by stating, not only are the folks at Decision Tech smart and well qualified and talented, eminently employable, but there will be changes ahead, which terrified some of them. So what were some of the outcomes over here? Well, you've read the book, you know. JR quits, Mikey gets fired, Jeff, the former CEO, turns into a BD guy, business development. Joseph is replacing Mikey in marketing, and a year later, Catherine redesigns everything. She's only got 5 direct reports. Also, Decision Tech increases market share, decides not to be purchased by the banana company, and they've got a fire in their belly. So the whole idea of functionalism is what takes you from here to here to here. Yeah? I'm going to give you 2 more perspectives. So the psychodynamic is a way to look at, well, what's above the waterline? I didn't have, good artwork here. So the rational or observed behavior is what we tend to see in a group, but below it is the psychodynamic tensions. So another way to view this is the humanistic potentials, right? So this assumes that there's conflict or problem. Examples here are Freud, who looks at the id, the ego, and the superego, and the tensions that surface there and create inherent conflicts. Part of this notion is biological, that there's certain causes that are going to get surfaced within a group, and also that groups are organisms. And like any organisms, they're going to evolve. That's one perspective, one approach here. Another one is the humanistic potential. The whole idea here, celebrated by Lewin and field theory and action research, is that we can grow, we can develop, we can evolve into the potential that we have. We just need to unleash that. And the way it might happen could be through things like therapy or treatment. Back to the book. So Catherine here uses a form of T groups, like training groups sort of, and a bit of psychodrama, partly for the purpose of Lencioni providing dramatic tension like a movie in in the book. But the net result of that is that Catherine facilitates change, helps people unleash their own potential, some restructures I've already mentioned, and she models positive psychology, the whole idea of flourishing and well-being. Another example over here is therapeutic. Groups I already mentioned change over time. Well, Catherine is an agent of change, you could argue, as the CEO. She confronts some of those conflicts. She tolerates the data. Twice at the beginning of every offsite, she says the same thing in her speech on page 40 and 62, I think it is. And the purpose of that is to assume that the group is going to evolve and assume that there are going to be changes and that that's a normal sort of ontological process. So, two ways of looking at how to apply this book. Let me give you one last one. The social identity perspective is a way to think about, well, are you in the group, in the circle, or not? And one key idea here is self-categorization. As I've already stated, the folks at Decision Tech are known to be eminently employable. They're bright, they're talented folks, they can go anywhere, they're well compensated. So they could choose to leave, as one does. They could be fired, as one is. They could assume different positions, as a couple of them do. And the whole idea of self-categorization leads to things like group goals. What are the actions that people want to adopt? The sense of coherence. Are we in or not? Influence. And examples that maybe reinforce this from Catherine is, I've already mentioned the fact that everybody's eminently employable, that there'll be changes ahead. She encourages conflict, not just tolerates it, she pokes. And in fact, if you look at the headings of the titles, they go deeper, they get naked. The whole idea there is to foster conflict. And new roles result. So Carlos has a new role, Martin is a CTO, Jan's a CFO, Nick's a COO, Joseph becomes marketing guy, and Jeff is a BD guy. Well, what's the value of these three perspectives? One is there's lots of different ways to look at how do you solve the challenges in your team. You could look at your team from a social identity perspective and ask, well, who's in and who's not? What are the behaviors of those who are in and those who are not? And how do I help them or coach them next? Second perspective, I'm going in reverse order obviously, is to look at what's below the waterline. Here's the observed behavior of my team. And as an external coach, I have a tremendous opportunity to observe some of these behaviors with 360s and shadow coaching. And then I can ask my leader questions. What's going on here? Or what's here? What are some of those potentials? Third way to look at teams is this way, sort of a causative model. Most of the research is this. I tend to favor the functional perspective and invite you to think about how you might apply this approach, these three approaches, to not only this book, but any teams you're working with. My name is Doug Gray.